What's up everyone, welcome to today's video, welcome to the GamerDad channel, thank you very much for tuning in. So today we're going to be taking a look at the exotic drop rates that were eventually published here, and some have commented on it back and forth across the community, and even one of my audience members told me and just mentioned in a video I made that they didn't think this was a good way to apply this exotic drop rate system. Now, if you look very carefully, the Dark Zone drop rates seem to stand out over the others. If you're playing Strongholds on Challenging compared to Heroic, or if you're playing in the Summit, you realize that your exotic drop rates are noticeably smaller than what you have in the DZ. In fact, the DZ is actually highlighted in like yellow, just showing that. Now, the question is, why would the developers do this? Because if you think about it, the Dark Zone is scaled differently, number one. Number two, you do have a lot of encounters in a smaller set of, in a smaller space, smaller land area or map area, because the Dark Zones are actually chopped down into 3 small areas. You can churn out a bunch of, these, what do they call it, these landmarks very fast, and they can respawn also very, very fast to accommodate that. So there are a lot of advantages for the Dark Zone anyways to get you drops as much as you want. And one thing that really has affected the division in a large part is the inability, or at least the game's very interesting setup where it doesn't seem to recognize its core audience and is unwilling to separate those audiences in the same game. Now, we had these problems show up in different forms and fashions from the old Division game. This is not going to be the first time where we've had these issues, or even in the Division 2 where we've seen the developers try to use loot to lure people into the Dark Zone, and it almost always backfires, doesn't usually work, or people ignore it at the end of the day. And I think this is probably why we're getting a game like Heartland, but that also is to be contested. I saw somebody mention and say that from what we saw from Heartland, it seemed like it was going to be PvP and PvE. So I guess we'll get to see how much emphasis that game has in its PvP and PvE. But I think this is the biggest challenge that the Division has faced as a video game overall. It hasn't necessarily defined or put in its own, or put it into place the right category for where PvE and PvP should be in the general conversation. It appears that there's a hesitation to define exactly where each mode stands, and I think it's a very tactful, lack of definition so that you don't tick off a faction of the game, because a lot of folk in the community really do have strong opinions in terms of how they actually approach the game and how they actually talk about it. So I can probably see the developers just, using a hot potato methodology, like, oh yeah, we'll talk about PvP later. Even in the latest, what was it, presentation that was done on Twitch, it just seemed like, right before Yannick started talking about PvP, he seemed to have taken an awkward chuckle of some kind. But I think it goes back to play to something that I've always sensed, and that is the Division 2 is a PvE oriented game. I remember getting a lot of flack for saying things like that. But so far, since the game has come out, we've barely seen any PvP modes, but yet we continue to get more PvE modes. Like, if that doesn't spell anything, I don't know what else does. In fact, they're talking about the next season getting another PvE game mode, which is insane. And I think it brings us to this conversation that the challenge with making a PvP game in today's day and age is you have to be able to, in a sense, draw a huge player base from it. The Division, on the other hand, it being a very, very intensive RPG with some non-RPG mechanics, will allow for, a game like this to not get the acceptance that it probably could, or you would have to change a lot of things and gut the entire premise of the game. And that is the way the Dark Zone is built. So seeing the developers trying to use this strategy to bring more people into the Dark Zone for those possible encounters is not going to necessarily change many people's minds who are already playing PvE anyways. And so that's one thing I think they recognize, but they still want to find a way to have people make their way in here. Because if you think about it, the Division's PvP mode is designed to be unfair, dramatic, problematic in many ways, and even cause players grief. That kind of system cannot thrive if you were to make it something that is mainstream. Mainstream PvP games usually have a sense of fairness attached to them. And so the Division PvP players seem to be wishing for a dream that is not going to happen, and it seems the developers are maybe not purposefully, but are in a sense leading them on. Like maybe it's going to happen for them someday for them to get some kind of, PvP content or PvP change or some remarkable transformation. I don't think it's going to happen in the context of the Division 2. Now, I'm not saying it will never happen. That's one thing I've learned to never say, but it appears to me that this is the possibility, or this is the direction that we're going to be going in, say, the next few years. And maybe Heartland is a game that's going to come in and possibly, I don't know, in a sense, bridge that gap. But again, there are rumors and talks that Heartland seems to be a game that is PvP and PvE. So I don't even really know where Massive has any plans to make a huge emphasis on PvP other than making dedicated arena shooters that would actually fulfill this fantasy for a whole bunch of people out there. So the big question is this change going to actually result to what they intend to see, more Dark Zone encounters just because of exotics? I don't think that's necessarily going to happen, especially the fact that even you as a PvE player, you have guaranteed sources of exotic loot. You can do the weekly activities, stay in your PvE lane. You can log in and do your legendaries, do one run each week, and you can, basically just farm the open world for exactly what it is you need. If it's not going to be dropping in a dark zone, there's then no incentive to even bother, doing so. And you will more than likely get yourself that exotic in the open world by already doing the activities that you like. So I don't see this change as something that would, in any sense transform PvP. And I think the conversation needs to be much more realistic. I think the developers, have not been as transparent as they possibly could with a PvP player base. And maybe, like I said, it's some tactful thing that they've been doing. But overall, I just hope that the PvP players don't eventually feel overly disenfranchised if they already haven't. And somebody actually is able to realize the truth that the Division is a PvE game. We just have the Dark Zone for drama and for, giving the game a little bit more relevance, or for those who want to engage in that aspect of the end game. But overall, it appears that the PvE is going to continue to be what this game emphasizes on. And that's what it is. But anyways, I just wanted to make that video and talk about this a little bit. Let me hear your thoughts in the comment section. And hopefully we'll talk pretty soon. Peace.